Okay, bring in participants now.
Good. Much.
Good evening, everyone. Good day to all. Welcome to the introduction of our 2021 Online Solutions Dialogues on Infrastructure Asset Management. For today, we have day one of capturing data for asset management in the region of Africa. So allow me to quickly familiarize you with important Zoom functions you should take real note of as you participate in today's workshop. We have simultaneous interpretations available for this morning. We have a channel in French, so we would invite everyone who prefers to listen to this workshop in French to check the French channel available in the interpretation section. So you will find that button right beside the chat button. You will have to have your Zoom updated to be able to access this. In the event that you're not able to see translations, we suggest to quickly update your Zoom and then signing back onto the meeting using the link in order to use the translation function. And to open the program, we want to invite everyone to introduce yourself by putting in the chat your name, country, and government agency. I hope everyone can start sending their introductions in the chat. All right, I can see some people who began introducing themselves in the chat. Thank you for that. Lastly, we want to ask you to still maximize the chat function for any thoughts and questions all throughout the program. And last but not the least, we invite everyone to turn on their videos to make this conversation human. Not turning on your videos feels like talking to this guy right here who's all shadows. So I hope you can join us and show us your beautiful faces by turning on your cameras for us today. And now I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Daniel Platts, the project lead for infrastructure asset management of the Financing for Sustainable Development Office of UNDESA. Daniel, take it away.
Thank you so much, Juana. Welcome everyone to our second round of online solutions dialogues on infrastructure asset management. I'm very impressed with the strong attendance and also with the homework that many of you have already submitted and done. You may recall that in the first round of the workshops, we asked you to prepare an asset management action plan. And this time we'll add some more homework, specifically on the question of capturing and utilizing the right data on infrastructure asset management. It's my honor to introduce to you a few important people for today's and tomorrow's workshop. First and foremost, there is Professor Ajit Kumar Parlikar, who will be our instructor today. He is a professor at the University of Cambridge. And tomorrow, my colleague and friend Vladimir Grotsev will focus on the second part of the workshop and be the instructor tomorrow. So you have two instructors. There will be interpretation again today into French, so please make use of it if you need it, simultaneous interpretation. And I also would like to introduce my colleague Claire Chan, who will be helping you a little bit through the different polls and Mentimeters and interactive questions, and especially read out the results and share them with all of you. A very, very quick slide now on the certification process that I talked about in the first round. One, if you can put on the next slide. As you are aware, there are 3 rounds of these UN Online Solutions dialogues. And of course, the first goal and first objective is for us to convey to you the material that is contained in the handbook, the UN Handbook on Infrastructure Asset Management. So it should be a learning experience. And also to receive a certificate that will enable you to get real technical assistance on the ground later on when we are allowed to travel. And that will enable you to apply for the UNCDF International Municipal Investment Fund. Those 3 rounds will happen within the next month and conclude within the next month. And then once you submit to us the homework, we will help you finalize it, and we will issue the certificate with you. I should also say that you can work with your local government colleagues together. We actually encourage that. So please see if there are others from your local government participating in this dialogue. And if you can sit together and work on it together, it'll be very, very helpful indeed. Now, of course, a very critical person that will help with all of this and that you have interacted with is Francis Barabanava, who is our senior consultant and a former town clerk in many cities, from many cities in Uganda. And Francis will share with you some of the key substantive objectives of the next 2 days. Francis, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you very much, Ioana. I think I'm going to take you through what we intend to cover today and tomorrow, like I did last time. I think, colleagues, you are aware that during the last workshop, which was basically on introduction to asset management, we covered, among the many things we covered, but we covered the challenges of asset management. And it was very clear that lack of adequate and right information was one of the key priorities in terms of challenges to asset management. And therefore today and tomorrow, we are going to be covering basically on information, and that is the data, because data comes from information, so we shall be able to cover it in detail. But specifically, we are going to cover the following. Number 1, put on the slide. Number 1, we are going to understand what data is in the context of asset management and why it is important for any organization. Then number 2, we are going to identify problems associated with asset data and then how they affect asset management. We shall also critically understand the types of data and how they can be captured and utilized in our asset management systems. We shall also analyze how data can be processed into useful information to guide decisions in asset management. You are very much aware that decision making is very critical in whatever we do, and therefore we must be able to make decisions based on empirical information, and that system is very, very important. Next, another slide. We shall also how to establish a robust asset management information system to enhance asset management in our systems. Information is power, and therefore it is important that we get the best benefit out of it. But also we shall apply this system at our strategic levels to make strategic, tactical, and operational levels thinking on how we can maintain our systems. You know, in our organizations, we have got different structures and we take different decisions at whatever level, depending on our organogram. But we're also going to examine different techniques of asset depreciation in order to determine the value of your assets. So there are very many techniques of depreciation. We are going to see which one is very applicable to local governments and where you work, so that you can go and adopt it to be able to regularly depreciate your machine, your assets accordingly. We're also going to organize regular asset evaluation as a good practice in asset management. It is important that we know the value of assets at every time, and once you know the value of assets, you'll be able to now to make informed decisions on those assets based on the data, which is very, very critical. Proceed. Another one. We are also going to appreciate the role of asset data in enhancing resilience of our infrastructure assets, particularly through risk assessment and adoption of measures to minimize these risks. You are aware, if you are talking about asset management, we are talking about resilience, and resilience is very key. You cannot have sustainable development unless your assets are resilient enough. And therefore, we should be able to protect our assets from the possible risks through risk assessment, so that we're able to protect and safeguard our assets from the possible risks that may attack them and compromise their resilience, and we end up not achieving the objective. We are going to recognize the importance of data in asset management in terms of planning, including development of asset management action plan. You are already doing asset management action plans, and I think you are beginning to test the importance of this data, of this information. But last time we covered very many planning, strategic asset management plan, strategic management policy, and therefore it is important that this information we are going to have is going to help you in planning for those things I've talked about. We're also going to cover the key performance indicators that help to evaluate effectiveness and sustainability of asset management action plans. Having plans is very good, but also having them effectively done is also another. So it is important that as we have made them like we are doing now, they must be implemented. And implementing them, we must come up with the key indicators that we are going to measure, that we are going to use to make sure that our plans are being implemented, not being kept in shelves, and therefore becoming futile, and they don't achieve the intended purpose. And therefore, these key performance indicators are very key, and we are going to cover them in the course of today and tomorrow. We're also going to walk away with techniques and tips on how to identify and implement the management software in organizations for asset management needs. I know all of you have got certain systems in place, but most of them could be manual systems, particularly in local government. They are still using the manual systems. I think we need to graduate from this so that we can come into software systems. So in this workshop, we are going to see how you can be able to introduce the software systems so that you are able to graduate and manage your assets much better. We are going to cover these things in these 2-day workshops, and I urge you to make sure you attend up to the end of yesterday, up to the end of tomorrow. Last time when we had a workshop about 1 month ago, the beginning was very, very exciting, very, very motivative. I think at one time we had about 459 people, and that was quite encouraging. Actually, Africa was the best so far, and that was on the first day. But then on the subsequent day, the number dropped to about 313, and that was of a drop of about 113 people. It dropped to about 346. But at first we were 459. it came to 349, 46 on the second day. So I'm urging you to make sure that we keep these numbers consistently high so that we are able to achieve, because we are talking about sustainable development through asset development. Also, if you are going to get these benefits I've talked about, consistency in attendance is very, very important. But if you attend one day and then you go away the other, you are going to miss out. And therefore, I'm urging you to make sure you attend. Otherwise, colleagues, I'm very, very happy. I'm seeing the attendance is improving, We are now in 200. We began when we are very, very few, but the number is increasing. I'm urging you to keep online to make sure for today and tomorrow we are able to attend all these achievements I've talked about, as you also endeavor to make sure you do your exercises which we are sent to you. I thank you once again for coming and wish you fruitful deliberations. I thank you.
So shall I kickstart?
Yes, over to you, Ajit. Please start.
Okay, thank you. Let me, first of all, I'll introduce myself and then I'll start sharing my slides. So as Daniel introduced me, my name is Ajit Kumar Parlikad. I'm a professor of asset management at the University of Cambridge in the UK. I've been carrying out research in the area of infrastructure and industrial asset management for the last 20 or so years. Been working with a number of local authorities, infrastructure owners in the UK and around the world as well. My particular research interest is looking at how we can use data and digital technologies to improve the way in which we are managing our infrastructure as well as industrial assets. So with that, I'll kickstart, and I just also wanted to add that I'll be delivering this this workshop with Vladimir Grostev, who is my co-instructor as well, who has taken a major role in writing the chapter on data within the handbook. And you will hear a lot more from Vladimir tomorrow. Today's session will be led by myself. So let me share my screen. Right, can you let me share my screen, please? Right, hopefully you can see the screen now. Okay, so let's get started. I introduced myself, so I'll skip that. Francis made a fantastic introduction to the 2 days of the workshop. I'll just quickly cover what we are going to do today. The key main things for today is that we are going to understand the importance of data in asset management. We'll go through the critical types of asset data that you will need for managing your assets throughout their life. And we'll also learn how asset data can be effectively captured and utilized. And tomorrow's session will be more technical in nature, where Vladimir will be taking you through the different types of asset depreciation, asset valuation, the KPIs and criticality analysis, and so on. So how we can actually utilize the data that you're capturing, the ones that we talked about today. So today's workshop is going to be more conceptual. Tomorrow's is going to be more technical in nature. So let's start out by getting an understanding of. I want to get an understanding of what you do. It'll be good to understand your background. So we've got a Zoom poll set up, so you can tell me what kind of assets you're responsible for in your job. Can we set the Zoom poll, please? So if you can share that information with me, it'll be good for me to understand where you come from. Right, thank you. Both started sharing your thoughts. Great, I can see that buildings and water is winning the race. Great. still mostly buildings, water, structural. It's something that we expected as well and compares with the other workshop that we ran. It's almost an equal quantity, equal numbers, buildings, civil structural, and water systems. That's fantastic, fantastic. A few more to come in. I think the proportions are roughly remaining the same, with water and buildings and civil and structural in the lead. That's great. Hopefully, most of you have already done, given your poll information, right? Okay, so shall we move on to the next one then, please? We share results. So obviously buildings at the top, and then we have civil and structural, bridges, roads, and so on, and your water systems. Okay, right. Close that. Now, moving on to, so we'll move on to another question again for you to share your thoughts. So we kind of lightly heard from Francis why asset data is important. And again, I want to just hear your thoughts at the start of the workshop. Why do you think asset data is important? Why do you think capturing data about your assets is important? Now, for this, you need to go to Mentimeter, and you will see your instructions on the chat in Zoom as to how to go to Mentimeter and enter your responses. Enter up to 5 responses, your thoughts on why you think capturing data about your assets is important. Right? And if we can share the Mentimeter outputs now, please, that'll be great. Juana, can we see the Mentimeter outputs?
Yes, we're loading it.
Thank you. And Claire, I'll hand over to you to go through the Menti poll.
Sure, sounds good. We're just waiting to put it up on the screen.
While we are waiting, you can keep thinking about the reasons why you think asset data is important. You can start thinking about what kind of data you've been collecting about your assets. Where might be the missing data points, the problems that you have with asset data, all those things. Keep your mind on topic and keep thinking about the problem of asset management and the problem with asset data management and so on. Is it just me, or am I still looking at?
Luana, is there an update on the screen sharing of the results?
Oops, that's the Zoom poll results. You want to get to the Menti poll. Right. I think, shall we just move on in the interest of time? I think there might be some technical problems with the sharing of the Menti poll results. When we get a chance, I'm sure someone will buzz in my ear or message me, and we can come back to your thoughts on why you think asset data is important. Is that okay? Let's move on. So those of you who had sent your responses on Menti, thanks a lot, but we will carry on with our workshop. Okay, so let's go through.
I do see, I have the responses up on my own screen. Unfortunately, I don't know if it can be shared. And I don't want to. If you
are the co-host, then you might be able to share. Let's see if we can get this working.
Do we want to?
Do you want me to stop sharing before you can share?
I think I can share.
Okay, great.
Do you see them now?
No.
It says I'm screen sharing. Okay.
If you need me to stop sharing, then I can do that.
Yeah, maybe you need to stop.
Suggest you move on, Ajit. I suggest you move on and let Juana and Cal figure out what's going on.
Fix this. I think in the interest of time, let's just move on. And
once we hear from one, we'll go back. Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that. Some technical difficulties, but we'll sort it out, and hopefully we'll get a chance to come back to your responses. So let's go through some of the reasons why I think having good asset data is important. So first off, as you all know, your assets, our assets deteriorate over time. The condition gets worse over time, and as your assets age, you'll start seeing, say, things like leaks appearing in pipes or potholes appearing on the roads, and so on and so forth. Now, any asset will have a natural deterioration process, but on top of this natural deterioration process, there are a number of other factors, such as build quality, the way the assets are used and maintained. They will all have an impact on the condition of these assets at any point in time. Now, when the assets deteriorate, they pose all sorts of challenges for our communities, right? If you have a road full of potholes, this is going to affect the users of the road. Journey times are going to get longer. There might even be more accidents as vehicles try to swerve and avoid these potholes. Now, the worse these potholes get, the more money it takes to fix them. Now, you've all experienced in that. However, now these kind of visible problems, they are easier to handle. You might notice them and repair these visible problems before they get really, really worse. The bigger problems are those that are hidden. The problems that are hidden are often more serious. Examples are structural deficiencies in buildings. Now, if they get worse, they could lead to catastrophic consequences, like the collapse of a structure. Now, maintaining up-to-date information can inform effective inspection schedules, for instance, and help catch such hidden problems before they cause serious service disruptions. Now, even if you have visible defects, if you have up-to-date data about the condition of these assets, it can help you in understanding the deterioration pattern and the rate of degradation better, so that you can plan your maintenance activities in advance. Yeah. Now, another reason why data is important is, as you all agree, as asset managers, we all have to deal with very tight budgets. Every year, you might see your budget is coming down, or it is not going up as much as the inflation is going up. So there is never enough money to fix all the problems that you need to fix. Now, if you have good data about your assets, this will help identify which are the assets that are critical for providing the services, and which are the most critical actions that you need to take. Now, this will inform efficient and appropriate prioritization of your limited funds. Now, sometimes you will see that you'll have to justify the use of your funds to your superiors, your political leaders, and so on. You'll have to explain why you need to spend the money that you have to spend. Sometimes you might even have to request an increase in your funding to enable you to carry out some of these essential works. Now, if you have good, reliable information about your assets, it will help you build a strong business case for your decisions and help you develop an evidence-based justification for the maintenance, renewal, and replacement of assets in your portfolio. So that's another reason why having good asset data is really, really important. Now, finally, when it comes to asset management, unfortunately, we are not dealing with a democracy here. All assets are not equal. Now, if I ask you which of your assets are critical for providing the level of service for your communities, you might be tempted to answer, well, all of my assets are critical. But obviously, this is not true, right? You've heard about criticality and so on from Linda. Not all assets are critical. All of your assets do play a different role in providing service functionality, and some assets are more critical than others to service provision. Now, without having accurate data, without having good data, you will end up fighting fires every day. Whenever an asset fails, you will think that that's a critical failure. You'll be going around running to fix it. Now, for example, how can you tell if a particular bridge that you need to get some work done on, whether it's a critical asset, if you don't know how many people rely on it for travel? How can you tell, for instance, how the failure of a particular pump might be affecting your water distribution system? How can you tell if this particular pump requires immediate maintenance if you're not monitoring its performance? So without good data about your assets, failures often come as a surprise, and then you might not have enough resources to deal with it. A good asset information management system will help you ask the right questions, fill in the missing gaps, and deliver effective information to enable effective decision making. Okay, so hopefully that kind of clarifies why we are actually doing this workshop, why asset data is really important. Now let's move on to another question. What data do you collect about your asset? And hopefully we've fixed some of the Mentimeter issues. So Claire, can you take over to the participants with the Mentimeter journey? So the question here is, what data do you collect about your assets?
Yes, Ajit, thank you. Let's get some responses in and then put the results up on the screen.
Yeah, and just to make sure we do it right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so someone else can share.
So you're all being asked to enter 5. Okay. So the results are coming in now, and we see this in a word cloud on the screen. So currently the most common responses are condition, asset condition, asset maintenance, how old your assets are, the age, cost of assets. We have a lot of other responses about serial number, name of the asset, depreciation, which is a key topic. We'll go into depth tomorrow. Financial data.
Great. I think the size of the phrases have stopped changing. So I think we've hit steady state. Thanks a lot, Claire. So all of these answers are correct. Great. Condition, maintenance, the age of the asset, the purpose of the asset, year of construction, all of it, great stuff. So I'm glad to see that you've started collecting the right kinds of data about your asset. And in this workshop, we'll put a structure around thinking about how to collect data about your assets properly. Okay, and most of the things that you will see in today's presentation, you'll see that yes, at least part of it we are already starting to collect. So before we dive into asset data capture and start talking about the different types of data we need to collect, let me get some definitions right, so you're aware of the subtle differences in these terminologies. So data are facts presented in a raw format, often unorganized and unprocessed. Now, information, on the other hand, results from the interpretation, organization, and contextualization of this data. Let's go through a couple of examples so we can be clear. So for example, we can say that the length of a road is 1.5 kilometers. Now, this is data. Now, if we say the length of all roads in our municipality is 25 kilometers, of which 2 kilometers are critical. Now, this is information because it informs your decision about which roads to fix first. Yeah. Now, if we take another example, we can say that the pressure readings from this boiler is 3.5 bar. Now, this is data. If I say the pressure readings from this boiler is 3.5 bar and it is too high for safe operation, this is information because it informs your decision about whether to switch off this boiler or not. So this means that data needs to be transformed and possibly merged with other pieces of data to be able to inform your decision. So that's how data is transformed into information, because it informs your decision. Right. Now, again, before we start talking about what data to collect, we need to figure out who needs asset data. Who are the key stakeholders when we are thinking about asset data? It's clear that having good asset data is essential for asset managers to carry out their duties effectively. However, when we are thinking about what data to collect about our assets, it's really important to think about the different stakeholders of the assets, not just the asset managers, not just the maintenance operators. Who are the different stakeholders? Now, there will be people within your organizations scattered across different departments at different levels of seniority and so on, who will all be requiring asset data for supporting their decisions and actions. Now, on top of that, it is also important to think about who outside your organization will benefit from asset data. Now, think about your suppliers, contractors, regulators, and of course, your customers as well. Now, you might be thinking, customers, why customers? Why do they need asset data? Now, think about this. A simple thing like being able to provide some advance warning of a power shutdown for maintenance or roadworks that you've planned at a particular location, this will enable your customers to plan and prepare for the event, reducing the inconvenience and the disturbance cost to them and their activities. So in a way, your customers also need asset data. But then keep in mind, not all stakeholders need all asset data, and certainly not at the same level of granularity. So understanding what data, in what form each stakeholder needs is critical for developing an effective and efficient asset data system. So let's now move on to thinking about what data to collect about assets. Now, for doing this, it's very helpful if you ask yourself, what do I need to know about my assets so I can make my decisions effectively? At the end of the day, the data is not there just for the sake. You're not collecting data just for the sake of it. You're collecting data so you can carry out your decisions and actions effectively. So if you don't think about the goal of data collection, you could end up collecting far too much data that you end up not knowing what to do with, or missing out on important pieces of data that will hamper your decision making. Now, in many of the advanced countries, we have now started seeing the first problem. Companies are collecting vast amounts of data simply because they can, and they end up drowning in data, and they have no idea how and where to use this data. Now, this is a complete waste of resources, right? So always start with the objectives of your asset management process in mind when thinking about data collection. The 6 W's, you might, the sharp-eyed amongst you might notice that there are actually 7 W's on the right-hand side box there. I've just split for clarity the what is the asset and where is it located. In the handbook, they're both clubbed into 1 W or 1 question. So the 6 W's here, it works well as a useful reference point when you're embarking on a data journey, but this isn't by no means complete, but it's a good starting point. So in order to look after your assets properly, you need to know what is it, what is the asset, where is it located, what is it worth, what is its condition, what is its remaining service life, what is its maintenance activities, what is its probability of failure, right? Now, this means for each asset, you need to collect physical data, location data, condition data, performance data, maintenance data, and financial data. And we will look into each of these bullet points in detail later. So If we know the answer to these questions, what is it, where is it located, and so on, for each asset, we can make effective decisions about what should we fix first, what are our most critical assets, and so on and so forth. This in turn will result in you being able to make the strategic organizational objectives better. You will be able to improve customer satisfaction, better management of limited resources, and you will also be able to improve compliance with regulatory requirements. But remember what I said before, the starting point is always your decisions and your actions. And this is the middle box here. So starting with your needs, but exploring the needs of other stakeholders as well. Don't forget other stakeholders, don't be selfish. First, understand what are the decisions to be made. Work your way backwards to identify what do you need to know about each asset so all stakeholders can make their decisions effectively. And finally, identify what data needs to be collected so you know what you need to know. Okay, hopefully that's kind of clear, the structured way of thinking about asset data requirement. So the asset management information system, or asset information in general, it supports all parts of the asset management system and facilitates better coordination between them. You probably have seen this conceptual diagram when you went through Linda's lecture, and you can see the place you can see the place for where the asset management information fits in to this overall conceptual diagram. Now let's go into a breakout session. We've now understood what kind of data we need to cover. We have understood what the importance of asset data is. We kind of described a structured way, a systematic way of thinking about identifying what data you need to collect about your assets and why. Now, in the next part of our discussion, we are going to focus on the issue of data quality, the problems that you might have with the collection of data or getting the right data to the right decision maker. So before doing that, before going into that part of our lecture, I want you to think about what problems have you faced in collecting data or managing data about your assets. So Claire, do you want to take over and take them through the breakout session?
Sure, yes, thank you, Ajit. So as Ajit said, the next topic of discussion will be about data quality. So we want to put everyone into breakout rooms just to discuss a little bit with your peers what issues you encounter with your data right now. So it'll be a 5-minute breakout exercise, and just have a discussion. Start by introducing yourself and just a few sentences on your background, and then the question to discuss is what problems do you find with the data you have on your assets. And then when we come back into the plenary, I'll call on a few participants to have you share your answers. So be ready for that. All right, I think we can enter the breakout rooms now. And please be sure to unmute yourself when you enter the breakout room and turn on your video so you can see one another.
Thank you, Claire. think we are all back.
People are still returning to the plenary. Everyone's back.
Great, thank you, Juana. All right, I hope everyone got to have a good discussion, although it was a short discussion, but at least you could meet a few of your fellow participants. I would like to now let any volunteers raise their hand if they want to share any of the responses they have to the question about what problems they have on their asset data. We're also getting a few responses in the chat. We have one hand raised. Sorry, I don't see your name on the label as your label, but please go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, yes. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Hello.
Hello, good
Hello,
afternoon.
Linda, are you hearing me? Good
Afternoon, go ahead.
Yes, yes, go ahead.
This is Dawood.
Go ahead, Dawood.
Yes, the problem we face in our local government here, one of is we get equipment or assets from central government, and those assets don't come with logbooks, especially vehicles. We received some vehicles and they don't have logbooks with the local government to which it has been given. Another thing, it becomes very difficult for the auditors to calculate the depreciation because we don't know the actual value of the assets in terms of money, so that we can calculate the depreciation rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawood.
Thank you, Dawood, for your response.
Welcome.
Maybe we can have one more participant share. Let's see. Juana, are you able to get just one participant? I think I saw a handful of hands.
Hello.
All right, okay, we'll have one response from, please go ahead.
Yes.
I think you're
Hi,
muted.
Okay, maybe we can move on, but we are getting a lot of people to put in their responses in the chat. A lot of it
Yeah.
about incomplete data, inadequate data, lack of skills to capture data. So yeah, participants, please continue to put your answers in the chat as Ajit continues with his presentation. And thank you to everyone who was volunteering to share their responses. Thank you.
Yep. And thanks a lot, Claire. And I've been looking at the responses on the chat as well, and a lot of people have been talking about the data not being complete, data not being accurate, not having the right data in place, and so on and so forth. And we'll touch upon all of these quality problems in this session of the lecture. So just straight off, we're going to another Mentimeter poll. You will see the instructions appearing on the chat. So we all have discussed, and we all now have realized, or we always had realized, that we don't have perfect data, and we face all sorts of problems with our data. We all know that the quality of the products that a company makes is really important, and the quality of service that our infrastructure provides is really important. And similar to that, the quality of data we collect about our assets is also critical. So you should start seeing data as one of your assets as well, and the quality of data is as important as the quality of the assets that you own. So before we move on, I just wanted to get your views on what you understand by the term data quality. Now, if just think about the first word that comes to your mind when you think about data quality, and enter that one single word that comes across into your mind. And hopefully the discussions that you've had before with your colleagues in the breakout has put your mind put yourself in the right frame of mind to think about data quality. So what's the first word that comes to your mind when you think about data quality? So let's do the Mentimeter poll and see the outputs. So I'll also, to facilitate this, stop sharing my screen so you can go to the Mentimeter.
Let's have a look at the, I believe it should be a word cloud again. All right, so our top response right now is accuracy, data accuracy. Accuracy of data. We're also looking at data that helps us keep track, gives us good information, data that's clear. Authenticity of data. Data that's used for proper maintenance. Clean data, validation. I don't know if responses are still coming in, but the top answer does seem to be accuracy, degree of accuracy.
I think we have stabilized.
Yep.
Right. Let's go back. Thanks a lot for your input. Now, when I share my screen, I promise you that I did not prepare the screen while you were providing your outputs. I kind of guessed that accuracy would be your top answer. And there we go. It's always, whenever I ask this question in any workshop with asset managers or any people, when you talk about data quality, the first thing that comes to your mind is data accuracy. Yeah, so it was as expected. But what we need to really understand is that when it comes to data quality, it's not just accuracy that matters. There are a number of other dimensions of data quality that matters as well. And we've been discussing some of those dimensions in the chat and the Zoom the Mentimeter poll. Some people said completeness and so on. So we'll look at what are the critical dimensions of data quality that is really important for asset management. So I think we all have a very good idea of what data accuracy actually means. It is how close the data reflects the reality. So as you can see in the picture there, it's obviously freezing cold out there. There's someone has built a snowman, but the thermometer there is saying 35 degrees centigrade. So obviously the thermometer is not accurate, right? Now, poor accuracy of data can arise from a variety of different issues. Now, there could be some accidental errors when capturing and recording data, but some of these errors could even be intentional as well. So people knowingly entering the wrong data into your system because they might feel, for instance, the correct data might put them at fault for some reason or other. So it is essential to make sure, for instance, any instruments that you're using for data collection, they are checked for accuracy and they are calibrated. And good ways to avoid data recording problems are, one, through automation. If you can avoid manual input, that'll be great. But if you have to use manual input, then proper training and proper motivation of employees is really critical to make sure that you're capturing the right data, the accurate data, as accurate as you can. Okay. Right. Now, other than accuracy, there are other problems, as you have highlighted. Often the data that you have is incomplete. You don't have all the data. I'm sure you've come across missing data points in your data sets when someone has either forgotten to make an entry or the relevant data was unavailable at the point of recording. I think someone mentioned in your feedback, the service record of vehicles is often missing. So that's a piece of data that you need, but it's often missing. So you have incomplete data. Now, on the flip side, as we discussed earlier, you could also be faced with an excessive amount of data as well, data that is unnecessary and irrelevant. And we classify them into this data completeness category as well. At the very least, if you have excessive data, this can be a burden in terms of cost and other resources. At worst, this can result in confusion and lack of clarity as well. So careful identification of your data requirements and an effective plan to capture that data will ensure that you've got complete data, or it will ensure the completeness of data. Now, next up is this issue of timeliness. So data that is out of date. And this can come across as an accuracy issue, but the root cause of this data quality problem is different to an accuracy problem. Now, untimely data or out-of-date data, this happens when the dynamically changing nature of your assets is not captured in a timely manner. It's really important to understand the rate at which certain aspects, for example, condition of your assets change, so that you can ensure that you're recording data at an appropriate frequency. Now, delays can also be caused because of your information management process, especially if the changes out in the real world, they're happening too quickly. Let's say, for example, we have a bad weather event, such as a flood. Things evolve so rapidly so that your data management process cannot keep pace with the changes. So data can quickly become out of date because of these delays. Now, these delays can be caused between the actual event, the data collection point, the point in time at which the data is recorded, the time when it was retrieved and ultimately used. So if you think about the whole information chain, delays can happen at any stages of this chain, and it can make data out of date by the time someone uses it. Next up is consistency. You say tomato, I say tomato. You can call it someone might call it a channel. Someone might call the same thing a drain. Is it a lift or is it an elevator? When you say a repair of an asset takes half a day, what do you exactly mean? Do you mean 4 hours or half a day? Is it 12 hours that you mean? So when recording asset data, it's really important to follow nationally or at least locally agreed standards, so we all know what we are talking about. So we have a consistent way of representing the data in our systems. So, and this is in terms of terminology, what you call your assets, in terms of the units of data, or the actions that you're taking, and so on. Whatever it is that you're representing in your data system, you need to make sure you're doing it in a consistent manner. Next up is accessibility. Now, we are living in a digital age, and rightly so, we are worried about data security. However, in our efforts to store data in a secure manner, we need to make sure that the right people are given access to the right data at the right time. Now, you might all be managing a complex portfolio of different types of assets and systems, and asset data is likely to be stored in different locations, and might be different locations, different documents, different files and systems, and so on. Now, decision makers need to have a very clear idea of what data is held where and how to access it. And they need to be enabled with that access as well. I've heard so many stories of site surveys and inspections being done over and over again because the data is there, but it is misplaced, or different people don't have access to a survey result, or they didn't even know what these that these surveys or inspections had even taken place. So understanding who your stakeholders of your assets are, understanding what data they need, it is really critical to ensure that you're providing the right level access to the right stakeholders. So again, the messaging is coming back to the same thing. You need to know what your assets are. You need to know what your decisions are. You need to know who your stakeholders are, what they need, and that enables you to ensure that you have got the right quality of data available in your systems. So just to sum up, what is data quality? It's clear that data quality is not just about having accurate data about your assets. There are a number of other issues that you need to consider as well when you're capturing and managing asset data. So what we discussed just now are just a few dimensions of data quality, the completeness, the timeliness, and so on. But you could think of a wider range of characteristics. So, for instance, you could have is the data that you're capturing in a cost-effective manner? Are you storing it in a cost-effective manner? Is the data objective, or is there some subjectivity about the data? Is the data stored securely, and so on? So there are a number of different what we call dimensions of data quality that you have to think about when you're thinking about asset data management. But then at the end of the day, there's one critical thing that you need to understand. Data quality is about the data being fit for use. It's not always about having 100% accuracy, or it's not always having data that is in real time and so on. It's about being fit for use. If it is fit for use, then great. But also remember that there are a number of different stakeholders, as we keep on repeating, of the asset data. One person's good enough quality may not be good enough for another person. So you need to really understand what these people actually need in terms of the quality for their decision-making processes. Right. Now, next up, again, another Mentimeter activity. What I want you to think about is, so we've talked about the data quality problems that we can face. What is the impact of poor data quality? So if you don't have the right kind of data quality, what kind of impact might that have on your businesses? Share your thoughts on the Menti poll. Claire, can you take them through?
Yes, Ajit, thank you. So everyone, please, again, click the link to the Menti poll in the chat box. And now that Ajit has presented a range of parameters and factors for data quality besides just accuracy, let's see what risks there might be from not having good quality data. So again, type in your answers in the poll. I'm not seeing any responses pop up yet. Feel free to submit whatever pops up in your mind immediately. Now we're just waiting for screen sharing to come back up.
Just to clarify, if you don't have the right quality data, what kind of problems would you face? What are the risks, as Claire mentioned? There we go.
Okay, now I'm seeing. So a lot of it is about decision-making that leads to poor decisions, having the wrong information. More specifically, you're not able to maintain, have routine maintenance, inability to plan maintenance, lack of response and intervention on time, unjustified investments, confusion, a lot of good responses, misrepresentation, misinterpretation. Scroll down. Wrong decisions, wrong policies. So we're seeing having poor data quality really can have a big impact on strategic decision making and lack of accountability. Poor budgeting for asset maintenance, not knowing the usability of your assets. Affects the sustainability of your infrastructure. It's definitely true. Loss of revenue, poor resource allocations. We're getting a lot of good responses. Negligence. It's costly to have poor data quality. Poor service delivery. Yeah, poor decisions, poor decision making. All right, that's a lot of good responses we're seeing. Thank you, everyone. All right, back to you, Ajit.
Great, thank you. I think we've got the message right. You've understood what data quality means, and you've also understood what impact poor quality data can have on your businesses. Or your organizations. And I think most of these bullet points that I've captured here, you have captured in your thoughts as well. Many people mentioned making wrong decisions. Of course, poor data quality leads to the wrong decision being made. One of the things you also might find is that if you don't have the right data in the right place, you end up searching for that data. If you just think back, how long have you spent looking for those records when you want to make a decision, or you want to carry out a maintenance action, you want to send the right piece of maintenance manual with the people who are going to repair a pump or something, and you keep searching for it and you can't find it. So there's a lot of time, money, and resources wasted searching for data if you don't have the right quality data in the right place. And of course, once you start getting a feeling that your data is inaccurate, the data is out of date, and so on, then you build some kind of mistrust in your data as well. So the data that is actually accurate in your system, you stop believing in it, you stop trusting in it. And what then happens is you either end up not using that data, and you just carry out and make your decisions and carry out your actions without using the data that you have, the good data that you have. And that's often a big problem because of the mistrust that you've built up in your data, because you happen to have some bad quality data. And of course, if you don't have the right data in the right place, in addition to spending time on searching for it, you might even go and repeat your data collection exercise. You might go and repeat your surveys, go and do that over and over and again. Again, waste of resources, waste of money, waste of time. And of course, when you're doing that, you're diverting your precious resources, your people, from other tasks where it's absolutely unnecessary to do so. The data was just there. You just didn't have the access to it, or you just didn't believe in that data. You go and collect the data again. So it's really important to understand that poor data quality carries a lot of risks associated with it. Of course, you're correct to think that good data management and having good data quality can be expensive. But on the other hand, you need to balance that cost of carrying good data with the risk of carrying bad data. And balancing that cost and risk will allow you to identify what is that sweet spot, what is accurate enough, what is timely enough, and when do we stop worrying about our data quality, and when can we go ahead and start having our good asset management practices in place. Okay, so hopefully that has given you a good idea about data and data quality. We will now take a short coffee break. And Claire, do you want to take them through the innovative coffee break that we have come up with?
Sure, Ajit, thank you. Yes, so we're gonna have just a quick 5-minute break. You're welcome to take it as a screen break, but we're also going to actually put everyone into breakout rooms just in case you want to, network with participants, introduce yourself again, exchange contact information, emails, phone numbers, and also feel free to answer our fun question, which is, if you could be anywhere in the world right now, where would you be? So I think Juana will put up a 5-minute timer, or maybe we'll keep it on this screen, but yeah, feel free to step away from the screen, grab some water, and then network with each other. And we'll see you back in 5 minutes. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. Looks like we have a majority of participants in session. I hope you had a a nice, although short break. I think we can resume presentation, Ajit.
Sure. Right. Okay. So hopefully you had a break or a good break, or you had a good chat with your fellow participants. Now we will go on to our next part of our presentation. So here in the next part, we are going to talk about how to set up an effective asset information management system. So just give me a moment while I set up my slideshow here. Right. Okay. So just as a recap, we have looked at the importance of asset data, and we have discussed a systematic way of thinking about identifying what data you need to collect about your assets and why. We also learned that it is important to think about the quality of data that we capture about our assets and the different dimensions of data quality that could be important. Now we will look at how can we actually set up the asset information management system. So I don't like to start off on a negative note, but I have to be honest here. Developing a good asset information system is not going to be easy. It'll be a resource-intensive process. There'll be people involved. It'll take time, but don't be put off by that. But a lot can be done with limited financial and human resources if the people involved show genuine long-term commitment. So that is really, really important. Even small steps can yield enormous payoffs, but that long-term commitment is really important. So when we are developing an asset information management system, it's really important that you select and adopt information processes that are suitable for the requirements of your own local or central government. There's an extensive range of asset management information systems that are available, but having good information and business processes is really critical. Simply just having a piece of software cannot replace good processes. A lot of companies launch into this thinking, okay, I'm going to buy some major software and it's going to solve all my problems. Wrong. The solution to having good data and good asset management is having efficient and effective processes in place. The software can then be used to support those good processes. So at the beginning, when you start off, your asset information management system can be simply based on an asset register, and we'll talk about what an asset register means in a bit. This asset register can help you build a record of all your assets and help identify which assets are deteriorating. Now, at a more advanced level, it'll be more comprehensive, and it can include decision support tools that can show you when to renew, replace, or acquire new assets. But the key message here is to start small, get the basics right, don't overcomplicate things, and as you build your confidence, add more sophisticated capabilities as your budget and your skills and your resources allow. Okay, now, you will quickly start realizing the benefits of good asset information system. As soon as you start your journey, you will start realizing it. You will see that your good asset information will support effective collection, processing, and presentation of data. You will have a better understanding about your assets. You will be able to maintain your assets better. You will be able to learn from your asset failures better as well. So such an information system, such a system will ensure that the right information goes to the right people for efficient decision making. It's also going to improve compliance with regulatory or government requirements and so on as well. So when we are thinking about setting up an asset information system, what do you think is the first step? What is the first step that you should take when you're just about to embark on the journey of setting up an asset information system? So we'll do a Menti poll again. Claire, I'll hand over to you.
Sure, thanks, Ajit. Right, so again, click on the link to Menti in the chat. Let's see what people think is the first step in setting up an asset information system. So we're seeing data entry and record management, identify gaps, set up a strong team, conduct a needs assessment, identify your assets, understand your information needs. Some of the surveying, understand the purpose of your data. So a lot of analysis, preview of existing records, identify a lead person, identify your assets. So we're getting a lot of responses about identifying what assets should be, you should collect data on in your system.
Right.
Determining the requirements, yep. Goals. Identify the stakeholder, identify a lead person. So we're getting a few of those responses. Information gaps. Yeah, thank you everyone for the responses. Again, needs assessment, we're getting a lot of those. Set up a strong and committed team to help identify your assets.
I think on that note, we'll kickstart.
Yeah.
Thank you. So all of those responses were great. But those of you who talked about setting up a good team, setting up a champion, setting up a team leader, and so on, congratulations. That is the first step. Get the right people in place. So we need to think about this in a systematic manner. Let's not just directly, when we are thinking about asset data systems and so on, directly think about data capture. Let's think about this systematically, and what we are going to present over the next part of this lecture, this workshop, is taking you through this systematic 7-step process for setting up an asset information management system. Now, this slide might be a bit unclear, the small letters and so on, but don't worry. If you go and take a look at the handbook, we have got these pictures and these steps explained in great level of detail. So I would really encourage you to take a look at the handbook that we have generated. Okay, so let's go through this step by step. So the first step, as I mentioned, and as some of you have mentioned, is to assemble a good team. Getting the right people, getting a good leader for the team, and connecting the team with the key stakeholders is really critical for success. The asset management information team, it should consist of local government officials and potentially outside experts and stakeholders, but each one in the team should have a clear list of duties and responsibilities. Now, this team should be tasked with defining data requirements for your assets and helping implement those requirements. And also, this team should be responsible for providing training to others on the use and regular update of this asset database. Now, I understand that not all government officials will have enough technical knowledge in data management, and that's fine, it's not necessary. The team must engage other resources necessary for adequate data collection, such as colleagues with relevant expertise and technical equipment and so on. Now, on the screen here, you can see a general organizational chart of the asset management information team. And now this chart includes an asset information management champion, and this champion is positioned between the senior public officials such as mayor and the departmental staff. Now, you might be thinking, do I need to create an entirely new team with new people recruited and so on? Not really. Actually, doing that might even be counterproductive because you are not really utilizing the vast amount of knowledge you might have in your existing team, your existing asset management team, for example. So you can actually take your existing asset management team and expand the role of the members of that team to include additional responsibilities related to data management. Or you might want to expand that team by adding new team members whose involvement is really necessary. For example, a senior IT manager that traditionally would not have a place in your asset management team. So, but then given that we have always limited resources, that these people will have other things to do as well, we must make sure that we do not engage relevant staff beyond what is minimally required for an effective team. So here's an important thing about, but then you mustn't look at this whole process, this asset data management process, as just another project. We should look at the development of asset management information system as a new and improved process of managing asset data on a regular basis. So this must be a business as usual, the new business as usual, not just a project with an endpoint in mind. Okay. So the role of the information management champion is really important here. And so we'll spend some time going through this in a bit of depth. This information management champion, this person is responsible for overseeing the day-to-day aspects of implementing this asset management information system. And this champion is responsible for motivating the team's collective efforts as well. Now, if your government has the capacity, it should designate someone from the technical ranks to fill in this role. Now, since this work is going to be performed mostly at a technical level, the person should ideally have an engineering or operational background, and hopefully some familiarity with general accounting and financial concepts as well. Now, you might say, that's really hard to find a person with engineering background with knowledge in accounting and financial. That's okay. Perhaps a bit of training might be necessary to fill in the gaps. But a person, an all-rounded person is what we are actually looking for here. This champion must have direct access, preferably to political and administrative leadership, because this team's initial task will be to mobilize the resources and secure buy-in from the senior officials in the local government. So that support from the top level is really important to make this a success. The head of that local government should give political support to the champion and help ensure that the team is able to fulfill its responsibilities and achieve its goals and objectives. Now, one of the problems when you start off might be that you have a lot of opposition. You might have a lot of inertia from political leaders or bureaucrats and union families and so on, because what we are actually suggesting here is a change in the way you're actually dealing with things. Nobody likes change, right? Now, the solution here is to engage with them, not to fight, but to engage with them. Explain the problems that you're facing due to poor data in a language that matters to them. Now, this might sound silly. For instance, politicians are always worried about their voter base, right? And talking about the problems of data quality, the way it affects the voters might help you in getting them on your side. Now, unions, on the other hand, might be worried about how this might affect jobs. Are you going to go through a lot of, bring in a lot of automation, take away jobs? No. So you need to be really clear about how having better data will help your people to do their jobs better and more efficiently, and also how having good data will result in a safe workplace. So you get them on your side. So just to summarize the duties of the champion, this person will lead the asset management information team in clearly communicating the asset management documentation, the protocols and processes to the team. The champion should ensure that all team members have a full understanding of their individual roles and responsibilities. The champion should lead the implementation of the plans according to the established and agreed upon methodologies. And finally, the champion should regularly monitor and advise on the team's performance and how this process is actually evolving. So we talked about the information management champion. Now let's look at the team members. The team members should be generally drawn from technical, operational, and service departments. So they know what they're doing. They know this part of the business, and they can effectively support the data management process. By talking to different stakeholders, the team will help define the specific data that is required for decision-making for each of the departments. The team will then need to agree on a structure for the asset management information system and also put a governance structure around it. So who are the key responsible people in managing the data properly? Individual team members will clearly have assigned tasks and work streams, but they also should demonstrate a commitment to supporting an effective asset management information system. The successful development and implementation of the asset management information system requires that sustained commitment of all the team members, as well as the key decision makers, the political leaders, and so on and so forth. So once you have set up your asset information team, now we get on to step 2. You're ready to start capturing data. Then hold on. First thing first, you need to know what assets you have, right? Now, this might sound very simple, but it's a fundamental thing that many organizations do not actually have a clear idea of. Now, if you don't know what you need to manage, what assets you own, you can't actually manage them, right? So the first step here is to create an asset register that contains basic data about your assets. First off, every asset should be given an identity. And I think many of you actually responded to my question about what is the first step in asset information management system setting up. You mentioned identification of the assets. So yes, possibly using a unique identifying number or a code. And if possible, you should physically tag the asset with the identification number. Now, some people use simply a sticker that has got a number on it. Some use more sophisticated ways, such as barcodes or QR codes that can be read by scanners or even our day-to-day mobile phones as well. Now, it is useful to be systematic, to use a systematic approach for creating a good asset identification system that is meaningful, and also it makes searching for associated data easier. Now, we are going to talk about asset hierarchies next, and it is useful to create a hierarchical asset identification system. Now, in addition to the ID number, you should also have some basic useful data about of the asset. What is the asset? When was it built? When was it installed? Who is the manufacturer? What is its value? And so on and so forth. Now, on top of that, on top of the data about the asset, you should also have other pieces of data in your asset register for driving your investment and maintenance decisions. And this includes what is the current condition of the asset? What was the historical condition of the asset? Now, if you have a historical record of condition, you will be able to understand how fast the asset is deteriorating, and hence when is it likely that the asset will need some intervention. Now, this can be in the form of inspection records, for instance. What intervention actions can be taken on the asset, and how much would each of these intervention actions cost? What is the current and historical performance level? How fast is the performance of the asset degrading? What is the impact of failure on the level of service? And of course, what is the probability of failure, asset failure over time? Now, you might think that all of this data might not be recorded as part of a single database or a single document, and it might be recorded in different databases or different places. That's fine. We're not talking about a single big monolithic database of asset register and so on. It's fine to have data in different places, as long as the data relevant to an asset is linked to the asset identifier, and there is clear knowledge about what data lies where. Okay, so next off, so I mentioned asset hierarchy in the previous slide. So what do we mean by an asset hierarchy? So asset hierarchy is a logical way of representing a complex asset system by breaking it down into its different parts. Now, here on this slide, you can see an example of a water system, which is broken down into its components. Primarily, so in this example, it is broken down into its sources and a distribution system. And the distribution system can be further broken down into pipes, valves, etc., and so on and so forth. Yeah. So that's what I mean by an asset hierarchy. Now, the design of this asset hierarchy should be informed by how you intend to use your asset information. So you will need to decide the number of levels in your data hierarchy and the type of data that you will be collecting at each level. Now, no matter what your breakdown, your database should use a consistent methodology for all your assets. So that is the key thing. Be consistent in the way you're creating this asset hierarchy and the data alongside this asset hierarchy. So obviously, data collection can be an expensive and time-consuming process. So you should really carefully consider the scope and detail of the data that is needed in your asset register database. Not every system has to be represented down to an atomic level. So we are not talking about breaking down this asset hierarchy to the nuts and bolts of an asset, nor is it practical to do so as well. So the extent of your representation necessary will depend on how you intend to use this data. As I've said before, you should always have the end purpose in mind when you're thinking about asset data. So the key message here is don't break down your assets into the minute detail. Often it is helpful to think about a maintenance managed item level. So the last level in your hierarchy should stop at where you plan your maintenance and interventions for your assets. So if you're thinking about a water system, you will stop at a pump. You will not go down to the detail of a filter, because then the filter can be considered as a spare part for the pump. The filter itself is not an asset, it's the pump that is the asset. So be careful when you're breaking down your system into this hierarchy. Now, the principle of information roll up and roll down that you will read more in the handbook, it will make it easier to appreciate how creating an asset hierarchy is helpful. So let's imagine that there's this particular sewer. Let's call it sewer main B. Let's say there's something wrong with the sewer main. Now, your government is not going to be alerted each time a sewer main is faulty, but the government needs to know that the overall functioning of this particular sanitation system is disrupted. Now, this is the idea of information roll-up. Yeah, if your asset database, for instance, is organized in a hierarchical structure, it will aggregate information about the sanitation system subcomponents, including our sewer main B, and it will help highlight that this particular sanitation system in this particular town or super town is disrupted. Now let's imagine the other way around. Let's imagine that all we know is that the sanitation system is disrupted, maybe due to customer complaints or whatever it is. Knowing the location and other data about the sewer that has caused the problem is useful for our maintenance engineer who's going to want to know what the problem is so it can be fixed quickly, right? Again, if your database is organized in a hierarchical fashion, you can drill down from the sanitation system to access the micro level information about the sewer main that is faulty and help you point out what the exact issue is that requires attention. Now, this is the idea of information rolling down, for navigating from a macro level data to data on the system's subcomponents. So having a hierarchical asset register database, it allows you to abstract from or zoom out or dig into or zoom into the details of an asset system or service area, depending on who is using the information and for what purpose. The more organized your asset database is, the more efficient the searching for the data, the querying for the data is going to be. So hopefully that kind of clarifies why this hierarchical way of thinking about assets and hierarchical way of thinking about data is useful. So once you have an idea of what information to capture, you can begin to list the services provided through your asset systems and the assets required for providing those services. And this will help you really categorize asset systems in terms of its functions, facilities, facility components, asset types, and so on. So from this list, you can start mapping out where each component would fall in a hierarchical structure, following that logical parent-child relationships in terms of the significance of the asset components. Now, you might realize that this is very similar to the way we organize our work breakdown structures, or even organize folders and subfolders in our computers, right? Now, when it comes to our infrastructure assets, breaking down asset systems into components, it allows you to document improvements and replacements more accurately for each asset type. So each government's asset portfolio will vary in its complexity. So breaking down here in this way, it can start serve as a starting point, but then you need to decide what is most effective for you. But whatever you decide, it's really important to take your time to get this right, because once you organize your data in a certain way, it can be difficult to change it later. So on the right-hand side, here we have an example of a part of an asset register hierarchy that may, for the example of the sanitation system from earlier. So you will be able to put your own visual asset mapping skills to a test in an exercise later and in your homework as well. So once you have organized your assets into this hierarchical structure, you have that skeleton for your asset register database. So let's take an example here. to clearly link the asset hierarchy that we have been discussing to the asset identification that we mentioned before. So I touched upon the need to identify every asset earlier, right? So now we have an idea of how our assets and systems are organized in a hierarchy. Let's look at how we can use this for developing a good asset identification system. So as I said before, every asset captured in the database should be labeled or ideally physically tagged with a unique identification number or a name. So when you're looking for specific information about an asset, such as its location, condition, finances, and so on, the ID will help you record, access, and continuously update these primary data sources over time. So when you're assigning these ID numbers, take a unified approach across all departments in your organization. Again, consistency is really important. In a sense, an asset's unique ID works to assign the asset a position in your asset register database relative to its other assets, its children, parents, grandparents, and so on. So let's look at the example in this slide. So here we have taken an example of a hospital's ventilators. So at the far right-hand end, we have the individual asset subtypes, and the identifier that we have given is DV 7.1.1.5. Now this refers to a specific type of ventilator, Drager ventilator. Now each Drager ventilator will have a sub-level with an identification, a unique identification number as well. Now, Drager ventilators, they fall under the more general category of ventilators referred to as VT in this hierarchy. Yeah, and you can see how the identification number, the decimal system or the identification number kind of rolls back as well. The hospital at the other end that owns this part of the equipment is referred to as HOS 7.1, where other hospitals will also have the HOS label, but they will have a different number, and so on and so forth. So if you do it this way, so if you need to know, for example, how much money you have been spending on spares and maintenance for this particular ventilator, you can just look it up using its ID, as long as all relevant records about this ventilator is linked to this particular ID. Similarly, if you want to know how much money you have been spending on all ventilators, you can look up 7.1.1 and it will instantly tell you again, if your data follows this hierarchical structure, it will instantly tell you. If your data is not following this hierarchical structure, it's a mess. It's going to be much more harder querying and getting all this data that you need. So this is just an example to show how a systematic asset identification system can be developed based on your asset hierarchy. You should choose a system that works for you, but need to ensure that this is implemented uniformly across all your assets and across all your departments. So just as a recap here, the benefits of having a systematic approach to asset data management is that it creates consistent definitions. It helps you map asset relationships in the database. It helps you establish a line of dependency between your assets. It increases data reliability and accuracy and generally data quality in a sense. And more importantly, it facilitates effective analysis, planning, and decision-making at all levels of our organization. And we saw the example with the ventilator question before. So let's put this to test now. I've shown you an example. I've talked about asset hierarchy. Let's now go through an individual exercise. Now, this individual exercise is going to be useful as a starting point for your homework as well. Let's go on to the chat and use the Google Forms to complete this exercise. And Claire, do you want to take them through the Google form and show them what to do?
Sure, G. Thank you for a very nice presentation. Yes, as he said, there is a Google form link in the chat, and this will be an individual, not a group exercise. So encourage everyone to sort of put their heads down and put their design skills to the test to choose one asset system, priority asset system, and kind of think of a hierarchy that you might design for that system. And sort of, again, this will be, this is kind of the starting point for the homework assignment that we'll introduce at the end. So hopefully that is an incentive for you to work and to think think through this exercise in the next 10 minutes. And again, this is a Google form, but you will be able to go back to your answers, especially when you go and work on the homework assignment. So just make sure to bookmark or save your responses. It should also be sent to a link should be sent to your email. So you will be able to revisit this form and your answers later on. So, yep, after 10 minutes, we'll reconvene and let one or two people share what they've started to design so far. Right, so we'll just have 10 minutes now to do the exercise. I think there's a couple comments about the link not working. It should be the correct link in the chat. If the first link didn't work for you, please try the second one that was just put in. All right, welcome back, everyone. Looks like we got almost 130 responses and counting. So a lot of people are already starting their homework assignments off on the right foot. We would like to ask for maybe 1 or 2 volunteers to raise their hand and maybe share their responses and some of the thinking behind how they set up their asset hierarchy. If anyone would like to raise their hand, or I can look at the responses and select someone to share. How about, let's see. How about Agatha Nugaret? Would you like to unmute yourself and share your response? Agatha Nugaret?
Yeah, thank you.
Are you able to? Great.
Yeah, I was able to unmute in the end. Hello, everyone. I'm Agatha. I'm talking from Banjul in the Gambia in West Africa. And I have chosen an asset class in waste management. So I looked at waste management infrastructure systems, and the asset category that I selected was about disposal. And within the disposal category, I included landfill. And so we could have several subcategories in the landfill category, like engineered landfill sites or informal landfill sites. So all of them can be captured in the asset management system. Thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Would you like to resume, or would you like to hear from one more?
If there's one more who wants to share their thoughts, that'll be great to hear. Otherwise, we can resume.
How about we hear from Mohammed Shire? Mohammed, are you able to unmute yourself and share your response? Mohammed, are you there? Otherwise, we can go to the one raised hand that we have. All right, Ayo, how about you go ahead?
Hello, this is Sofani Mbambali from Uganda, Amulata District Law Government. I've put agriculture mechanization system. Then in that system, we have to break it down because the system may have like bulldozers, like tractors. So you also record what you have in that system, bulldozers, tractors. Then you guide and you break down the supporting equipments. You have like the plows. Then finally, you also record the things like spare parts and the servicing units.
Right. Thank you, Juliet. Thank you. Just to respond to that, it's great that you've thought about how to break down those systems and your vehicles into its subcomponents. But one thing to keep in mind is that when you're actually creating an asset register, you need to think really carefully about what is an asset and what is a spare part of the asset. And we have to stop at where we think the asset is. So once we get into the spare parts of an asset, that really need not come into your asset register, because then otherwise you will be carrying a whole lot of data, or you'll be collecting a lot of data about your spare parts, which you possibly do not need. So you need more data about your assets, not about your spare parts. So just keep that in your mind when you're thinking about the asset hierarchy. Good to break it down, but need to know when to stop. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your responses. And we can continue with the next part of your presentation.
Yeah. Okay. So let's carry on now. So let's move on to step 3. So now you've got a very clear idea of what your assets are, how they are organized, and how they are interconnected to deliver the services that you need to deliver. Now you need to start planning your data collection activities. It's not time to collect data yet. Have a planning step about thinking about what data do you want to collect about each asset that you have identified, who will collect the data, how are you going to collect the data, and what kind of sources are you going to depend on, what kind of format will the data be collected, and what kind of format will it be stored in, and when are you going to collect the data. So this plan should have a timeline as well. So let's go through some of these now. So what are the kind of data that you might want to collect about your assets? So we went through this in the first part of this session, where we noted down the condition data, the location data, and so on and so forth. So let's go through this in a bit more depth. The physical data that we mentioned, we have gone through that in sufficient depth before, so we will focus on the other elements of the data. So location data, so location data is first off. So if you have a problem with an asset and it requires intervention, let's say you need to carry out regular maintenance, you need to know its location. Otherwise, you will spend far more time searching for that asset if you don't know exactly where the location of the asset is, and that is reflected in your asset database. So your asset database should clearly identify the location of the asset so you don't waste time. Now, there are a number of different ways to think about the location of your asset. Now, the location can be designated within the administrative divisions of your government, and this is quite useful because it's going to tell you who is responsible and accountable for this particular asset. Of course, an address can tell you where it is, or a zone of service. So you might be using zoning, for example, in water networks or electricity networks and so on. Some organizations use zoning. So identifying which zone this asset belongs to will help in quick identification of where that is. For linear assets, it's a bit tricky, the roads, rail, and so on. So you might want to use start and end distances or milestones that identify a particular section of the asset. Even map coordinates, either in terms of official land registry maps and coordinates that are used in land registry maps, or latitude and longitude for GIS coordinates. Now, this lat-long coordinates, the latitude and longitudes, they're very useful if you want to locate your assets using some publicly available or freely available apps such as Google Earth. So if you know where the asset is in terms of latitude and longitude, you have the exact location. Now, this is useful for fixed assets, not for mobile assets, because now the mobile assets will be moving around all the time. So the lat-long coordinates, unless you have a GPS system on the asset itself, is not going to be so useful. Next off is condition data. Now, asset condition data, it can be quantitative or qualitative. It can be detailed or it can be generic. For instance, you might simply assign good or bad labels, or you can have a much more detailed system. So I'm going to take you through one technique that we have described in the data book, in the handbook. And one of the key reasons for tracking the condition of the asset is, as we have described before, is to know how long is it going to last for before it fails or it requires any maintenance. Now, for this, the first thing you need to know is what is the expected service life of your asset. Yeah, and that's on the left-hand side of this slide. Again, it's not really in the font sizing is really small. I apologize for that, but then the details of this you can again go back and refer to the handbook. So the expected service life of your asset is how long is it likely to last for. Now, if you know or can estimate the expected service life of your assets, you can measure the condition of your assets against that. Now, note that the expected service life is different from the design service life that you've heard in the first workshop. The design service life is based on the ideal use, whereas the expected service life is based on realistic use. So when you're estimating the expected service life or estimated service life, you need to consider the standards of design and construction, the utilization of the asset, the operating environment, what maintenance it has gone through, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So lifespan estimates can differ from one asset category to another, and it may also vary among asset types. For instance, one type of a bridge might have a longer expected service life than another type of bridge. Now you can see on the slide and in the handbook, we've given some examples of expected service life of various categories, but this is something that from an engineering point of view, from a deeper understanding of your assets point of view, you will have to develop your own understanding of expected service life. Now, the assets that are closer to the end of their expected service life will be generally in a poorer condition than newer assets. That's obvious, right? So the older assets may require more immediate attention and regular checkups than the newer ones. So condition assessment involves measuring how much of the expected service life is left. Now, in the example shown in the slide, we have a condition assessment score where lower the score, the better the condition. So the condition scoring criteria needs to be developed individually for each asset category and, if necessary, for each asset type as well. Remember that we're still in the planning step of this methodology. So getting these kind of things right now will save a lot of pain later when you're actually going to collect this data. So now, how do you carry out this condition assessment? Now, this can be done through examination of historical records or consulting with experienced engineers or other personnel. But wherever possible, you should go and try and visually assess the condition of your assets through on-site visits or specific tests where necessary, especially for those assets that are at a high risk of failure or whose performance might meet some minimum levels of service demanded by the community. It's really important to get this right at the first go. And the asset condition data that you gather through on-site visit, it will require some analysis now, because different people may assess the condition of the assets differently, even if they were trained on one standard method. And you might have experienced this before. Two people looking at the same asset, one person might say, yeah, that's good. The other might say, I'm a bit worried about this asset. Yeah. So when you're not sure of the assessment, it might be useful to get multiple expert opinions and have a discussion and come to a collective agreement on the condition of the asset, and collect relevant evidence as well, such as taking photos, looking at schematics and design drawings, and other data that we might be able to collect. It's really key to understanding the condition of the asset. And this will vary from asset to asset. So that's about condition. Now let's look at performance data. Now, knowing the condition of the asset is useful, but it is not very useful unless you can actually tie it to performance, right? So the asset performance assessment will tell you whether the asset can effectively support your community's needs, the system's needs, and so on. It will tell you that what a particular condition score means in terms of the level of service that the asset can provide. Just because an asset is in poor condition does not automatically mean that you have to take immediate action. It depends on how it affects the service within the system that you have. Let's say, for example, you discover that a section of a footpath has developed a number of cracks and it has become overgrown with weeds. Now, you need to understand how this poor condition affects the performance of the path. How does it affect the people who are walking by that path? If it is going to affect the passability of pedestrians, then it requires the city's park and recreation services to put in a work order to fix it. Otherwise, a little bit of growth with the weeds and a little bit of cracks doesn't mean that you need to immediately jump ahead and fix it. Remember, you're always dealing with tight budgets. So knowing how the asset's condition affects the service that is provided by the asset is really critical, so that you can take proactive steps to deal with these problems. Now, collecting data on asset performance can be a complex and sensitive process because what you're addressing here is the impact of the asset, which not always can be objectively determined. So you need to develop some some clear assessment guidelines during your planning stage of your asset data collection process. Now, this, if you have a good set of guidelines, it will ensure that there are clearly outlined indicators that you can follow to assess performance and identify where interventions are needed. So performance indicator ratings must include the data on physical condition of the asset and operating performance. Now, this slide here, it provides some guidance on how you may be able to extend your physical asset condition with other operating performance indicators. Again, these are given for guidance. You possibly should be looking at your own assets and developing your own set of guidelines that makes more sense to you. So once you've collected all these different ratings that go into the performance indication, the overall performance rating can then be obtained by, for instance, taking in the average score of the different ratings. And this performance rating can then be used to determine whether an action needs to be taken imminently or not. So we have looked at condition data, we looked at performance data that links condition to actual service. Now let's look at other pieces of data, so maintenance data. So you need to collect data about the maintenance of the asset throughout their life cycle, right? Knowing the details of the checkups and the repairs that you have done will help you explain the changes in the condition of an asset over time and anticipate future maintenance needs. The performance of the assets are more difficult to assess. So some assets they might be more difficult to assess, such as underground assets in your water supply system or your wastewater system, and this will especially benefit from regular maintenance schedules, and which is supported by complete, accurate, and up-to-date information. The office or the department that directly deals with maintenance work orders will be the main source of such data, but you may also turn to other departments such as finance and so on for more comprehensive information about maintenance of the assets. So typically maintenance data should include the cost of maintenance, the different maintenance activities that can be carried out on the asset, as well as the cost of that maintenance activity, the person who is responsible for that maintenance activity. If you have a planned maintenance or an inspection schedule, then that is an important piece of data. Description of the identified defects when you go and do these inspections, clearly marking what are the different defects that you found is really important. And finally, you need to have the work status. So if you have started some work on an asset in terms of maintenance, where is it now? Have you just started it? Are you about to complete it? Are you delayed? So the work status of your assets is really important as part of the maintenance data. Now, if your government has a maintenance management system, a computerized maintenance management system, for example, that data should be integrated with your asset management information system as well. Now let's look at financial data. Every asset management activity has got financial implications. Now, even building your asset register, as we were talking about, it involves paying for staff, technology, equipment, travel, and so on and so forth. And assets, on the other hand, can also be important sources of revenues as well. So whether through collection of user fees or leasing out land or sale of public land and so on. Now, some of the financial data that you need to have about your assets are how much did it cost to buy, build, install? How much does it cost to operate and maintain? If you have to replace the asset today, how much will it cost? How much will it cost if you have to replace it in 10 years down the line? Now, you will hear more about different ways of handling financial data tomorrow in Vladimir's session, so I'm not going to spend any more time on talking about financial data. So we have talked about the different kinds of data that you need to collect and how you might, and so now we are going to focus on how you might actually collect this data. So before we step into that, I just want to hear from you again. What are the different techniques that you use for collecting data about your assets? So here we have a Zoom poll, so we don't have to go anywhere else. So I've specified some techniques here. Just let me know, what techniques do you use for collecting data about your assets? So of course, as we expected, manual survey is leading the race. A lot of people use manual techniques, and there are some who use satellite images, and possibly there is some overlap between satellite images and Google Earth. Some use Google Earth as a useful source for of satellite images, but others might have their own other sources. Drones is coming up, fantastic, and sensors as well. That's really advanced. Drones are becoming more and more popular these days. They are getting quite inexpensive. They're quite cheap. You can get drones for very little money, and you can easily control it using your mobile phones and so on. They can take good pictures of your assets, especially those assets that are hard to reach and so on. So I'm working with a seaport in the UK, and they are planning to use drones to inspect their cranes and the condition of the structures of the structure of the crane. So you don't have to send a person all the way up. You can just fly a drone, take pictures, take images, and analyze the images for any damage in the structures. And drones are also being used for monitoring bridges as well, to do inspections of bridges. So great. Manual survey, 97% manual survey. So that's kind of expected. And this is possibly going to be the answer regardless of which country I'm running this workshop. Manual survey, it's an essential part of the data collection process. You have to be there. You have to see, touch, and feel the assets in order to have a real understanding of at least the condition of those assets. Great. I think 70% have voted so far. Are there any other responses coming in? But it's pleasing to see a variety in the way in which data is being collected throughout your assets. So thanks a lot for those who have responded. So I'm going to end the poll now and carry on. And interestingly, after we end the poll, share results. Okay, so manual survey, as we expected, is the winner. Before we move on to talking about data collection techniques, we will take a quick break. It's been a while since we have been sitting in front of our computers, our phones, and so on. So Claire, the next comfort break exercise, over to you.
Sure, thank you, Ajit. Yes, so we have, before our kind of last 30-minute segment of the workshop, we will have another 5-minute virtual coffee break. And again, we encourage you to meet one another and exchange contact information. And also feel free to answer question. If you were given the money to spend on any kind of skills training for your staff, what would you spend it on, as a sort of conversation starter? But yeah, so we'll put people into breakout rooms to freely chat, and we'll reconvene in 5 minutes. Thank you.
We could start.
Welcome back, everyone, to the workshop, and I'll again just hand it over to Ajit to resume his presentation.
Thank you, Claire. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully that was a good break. So just to recap, we are in step 4. We are in the data collection phase of your setting up your asset management information system. Yeah. So let's first look at what kind of data sources are going to be useful in this phase. Remember, even if you don't have a formal asset data management system, you're not going to be most likely starting from a blank sheet of paper, right? There are possibly a variety of records already exist about your assets. You just need to find them and organize them more effectively. For example, financial data about your assets. This might be sitting in the procurement department in their purchase orders, tender documents, and so on. Technical data can be obtained from design and as-built drawings, some of which you might have to talk to the contractors to obtain, maybe. You might as well, now this is a bit of a cheat, you might as well be able to use Google Earth to look at the satellite images of your region and identify your assets that are visible from the sky. And I noticed from your responses earlier that some of you do use Google Earth in order to collect data. And of course, don't forget the most important source of asset information, people's brains. A lot of people in your organization will have a lot of knowledge and information about your assets. So tap into their brains, tap into their knowledge, tap into their information, get them then formalized and systematized through your asset data management system. Now, it's quite useful to remember the 80-20 rule. You can collect the first 80% of your data with 20% of your asset management team's resources. However, collecting the last 20% of the data is likely to consume the remaining 80% of your resources. And perhaps that also works from a value point of view as well. The first 80% of the data that you collect with 20% of your resources might be the most valuable thing. So similar to the way in which you're prioritizing your asset management activities, you should also prioritize your data collection activities as well. So you get the biggest bang for your buck early on. Right. So how to collect data? There's no better way to capture data about your assets than, as we discussed earlier, by doing site visits and actually looking, touching, feeling the assets, so to speak. Now, on-site surveys, they provide the most accurate method of filling in the data gaps. Now, there are software tools and spreadsheets that can help assess the validity, completeness, consistency, and so on of your data. But then, as I said earlier, technology alone cannot confirm the accuracy of data on the ground. So you need to go on-site visits. It's really critical for gathering and verifying the data that you have for asset management. Now, when you're going on to site visits, come equipped with a plan based on the data that are most critical to collect. So this is why the planning phase that we had earlier, this is really important. So don't just walk into a site without having a clear plan. To facilitate your data collection on the ground, it's good practice to use worksheet templates based on a predetermined structure of your asset register database. Now you can find some examples in the handbook as well. Now, in most cases, you might want to start collecting data at the highest level in the asset register hierarchy, and then you work your way down. And indeed, in addition to collecting new data during your on-site visit, you might want to seize the opportunity that you're already there on site to verify other existing data as well. But be systematic about it, otherwise it might turn into an haphazard process. But use the opportunity to collect as much data as possible. This will probably increase the time required for the on-site visit to complete your survey, but ultimately it might save you some travel time and related expenses, especially if your sites are geographically spread out and multiple trips are going to be costly then. Usually you will need to visit a range of sites and sometimes one site multiple times to gather comprehensive data on your critical assets. One thing, make sure that the members of your asset management information team, the data collection team, they are well equipped to do on-site data collection. Make sure they have got the right equipment, for example. If you don't have the expertise or if you don't have enough resources, this job may also be outsourced to trained surveyors outside your team as well. But make sure if you're outsourcing something, make sure you're outsourcing it to the right people with the right training and the skills and the equipment to do so. Okay. Right. Now, where does technology play a role in all this? We talked about on-site visits. That seems like a manual operation, but where it makes sense, use technology to improve the data collection efficiency and the quality. Now, when it comes to technologies, there are different types of technologies that you can think of. The first off is manual assist. So these are, for example, instead of collecting data with pen and paper, you do it with a handheld computer device, an iPad or a tablet or a phone, which is equipped with GPS facilities. Even simple smartphones that we all use, they are powerful data capture and storage devices. They can scan barcodes, they can take pictures, they can geolocate assets, and much more. Just a simple smartphone that you have, not very expensive. Even the cheapest smartphone will be able to do all these things. Now, data collectors may work as a team and may use additional equipment, such as simple laser-based measuring devices that will just speed up the whole process without making it too expensive, speed up the whole process compared to your tape measures and so on. The other thing, of course, you have completely automated way of data collection, so cutting edge data collection equipment. So some mentioned sensors. They have a high degree of automation and precision, and then they enable very fast and complete data collection. But then, of course, procuring such automated equipment is very costly, and it might not be feasible for small municipalities. Equipment for capturing and storing data, such data, they include robotic scanners. So on the slide, on the right-hand side top corner, I have put a picture there, which shows a completely automated robot with vision systems built in. It's inspecting a tunnel. Or you could deploy real-time condition sensing condition monitoring sensors as well. Now, one of the pictures at the bottom left, it shows the output from an automated 3D imaging system that is fixed to a train that is passing through a tunnel. Now, these images, which are captured on a regular basis, can be automatically checked for deviations from normal conditions, such as appearance of a new crack and so on. But keep in mind, these are expensive, so use it where possible, but not a complete necessity. It doesn't need to replace manual inspection. There's something in between as well, semi-automated techniques. This involves comparable equipment like the automated method, but with somewhat a lesser degree of automation. So drones are a popular example of such a technology, where you need people to fly these drones, point them in the right direction to take the pictures, and so on and so forth. The picture here on the right bottom corner, it shows how images that can be captured by the reversing camera in a car. So this is something that you already have. Many of the newer cars, they've got a reversing camera. And the images that are captured by the reversing camera, if you hack the camera, it can be used to detect defects on road surfaces, for example. So that's a kind of a semi-automated way of capturing data, which might not add a lot of cost to your existing equipment. So we talked about data collection. So once you collect the data, they need to undergo a proper expert-led review. You need to make sure that the data that you've collected is of good quality. And the data validation should be done by a team of experts with good asset management experience and familiarity with your assets as well. Not some external consultants who have got no idea about the assets, but someone with familiarity about your assets. The purpose of this data validation step is to make sure that the data is of good quality. Now, we talked about data quality earlier. Think about each of those data quality metrics and get a sense of the quality of data that you have. Get your data reviewed by experts. They could even get a quantitative sense of data quality using metrics such as the one that I've shown here on accuracy. Now, remember this, the aim is not to get the data perfect. You can never achieve perfection unless you have an infinite amount of money and resources. And also you need to keep in mind that there's always a diminishing marginal value for data quality. So you need to decide what is good enough for you. As I said earlier, it should be fit for use for you and other stakeholders of the asset. So in addition to the data quality metrics, you may also want to make sure at this step that the data is secure and the data collection techniques that you've developed and you're doing are affordable. So make sure that that question about affordability is always in place. Now we come to the last poll of our session, which is going into step 6. This is where you actually have the actual data. How do we actually store the data? How do we organize the data in a proper data system? So what kind of systems do you actually use at the moment to store asset data? As expected, I can see paper records and Excel is in the lead. And this is true for many municipalities, local authorities, and even big infrastructure owners that I speak to in the UK and other countries. Excel always leads the game, and then comes paper records. So I'm not surprised to see this, but I'm also happy to see that some of you are beginning to use more sophisticated asset management software, specific asset management software. Some of you are familiar with MS Access as a database management system, and some of you are using SQL as well. But clearly, the biggest proportion of people use Excel and paper records. So that's good to know. Great, more responses are coming in. Great. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll. So that gives a clear idea. I don't think from here on another type of data collection or data storage service is going to win the tournament. So paper records clearly has won here, followed by Excel. Right. Great. So I'm going to stop sharing this and continue on. So what are the different kind of systems that are available out there? Of course, paper and Excel is there, but there are different types of asset data management solutions that are available in the market. Now I've broadly categorized them into generic systems, generic data management systems, enterprise asset management systems, and asset-specific data management systems. That's my own classification. Most of us are already familiar with generic data management systems, right? Like Microsoft products. Excel is clearly the winner here, but you have PDF files and other ways of storing data as well. I would not really recommend using normal PDF files because they are really hard to search through. Microsoft Office products is a reasonable way to start off. For those who can't afford Microsoft products, and these require license fees and so on as well, there are actually open source versions such as OpenOffice that provide very similar capabilities to Microsoft products as well. Now, I've also mentioned MS Access, Microsoft Access as a database system. That's a simple database management system that is quick, easy to learn. But there are, again, MS Access requires you to pay for it, but there are open source free database software that are available, like MySQL. Again, you need to, in order to exploit the potential of any of these tools, including Excel, you need to have the right skills in place. Excel is a very powerful tool if you know how to use it. So in addition to these generic data management systems, there are actually professional enterprise asset management systems. You might have heard of IBM Maximo or ABB Ellipse and so on. They're very highly popular. They do provide very efficient systems and tools to manage asset data, but they require very heavy investment in terms of money, skills, and effort. If you can afford it, great, but do think about this two or three times before you jump into getting a big, a major investment into an enterprise asset management system. You might want to, as I said before, start small, get a feel of how to manage data before jumping into this big, expensive software. I told this before as well. The software in itself is not the solution to your problem. It's having the good asset management practices, good data management practices in place, the processes in place, that is more important than the software. So don't jump into the software if you don't have good processes in place. And finally, there are specialized solutions for specific asset types. For instance, there's a package called iRoads, which are useful for highways assets. BridgeStation is commonly used for bridges. Invida is another system, or Planet is another system for facility management and buildings. So there are different software tools that have been designed for specific asset types as well. So the capabilities of these assets, these systems can be really varied. Some provide a simple but efficient asset register. Some offer a more sophisticated work order management capabilities, and very few of them, but some do, they offer fully fledged data analytics and decision support capabilities as well. So where you can actually determine the most optimal maintenance plans and so on and so forth. So depending on, and of course, the more capabilities and more sophistication these tools have, the more expensive they are as well. And you need to remember, a lot of these basic things can ultimately be done by Excel as well. So you be wise in your investment in your data management systems. So choosing what is appropriate for you is really, really critical here. The functionality and the degree of complexity need to suit the nature, the size, and the complexity of the assets that it describes. So again, just repeating it again, for smaller municipalities, a simple spreadsheet or a database software with data tables, queries, and reports could be just adequate. Local governments with huge, extensive portfolios and the resources to manage more complex systems might prefer more sophisticated, but more expensive software systems. Okay, right, now we go on to step 7. So this is the last step in our journey, but then the journey does not end here. You have just begun the journey. So this is a step where it goes around in circles. It's very important that once you have the asset data in place, the data is updated over time. Make sure once you put in all the effort to get the data of the right quality, you maintain the quality of the data properly. Because just like your assets, if you don't maintain your data, your asset data will also degrade and fail. Right? So your asset management information team must periodically assess whether the information that you're receiving is adequate to meet the needs of the different stakeholders and whether they are actually being effective for good decision making. This regular assessment should also check whether the results of their decisions are actually delivering the expected outcomes as well. Now, asking these questions on a regular basis can help you improve many elements of your asset register database. The answers might, for instance, change your specification against which the data is collected. You might also revise all this information requirements and the business processes as your information system becomes more and more sophisticated. Now, when you establish a sound asset information system, the feedback cycle, as we have shown in this figure, is set in motion. So it is a never-ending, never stopping process. And as I said before, it is not a project that you start and stop and we say, yes, we have done our asset data properly. It doesn't stop there. It's an ongoing process. You need to make it part of your new business as usual. So that's actually brings us to the end of today's workshop, and I'm really thankful to all of you for listening and contributing your thoughts and participating in all these exercises. So just to capture the key takeaways of today is that a systematic and methodical approach to data collection, it will result in more effective and robust asset management information system, and it will deliver the reliable information necessary for sound decision making. Having adequate data, good data on location, condition, performance, and finances of your assets, it will allow governments to anticipate the resources that are required to be set aside for repair, renewal, replacement, or other interventions over the long term, particularly for critical assets. And if you ensure the accuracy, quality, and quantity of the asset information, it's going to be really worthwhile. But it is a collective effort. The costs and the costs and effort in terms of collecting, validating, and maintaining the data, it should not exceed the value of information system. Now, again, I end by the final note is that the key to success in all this is having long-term commitment and top-level support in what you're doing. So that's where I will end the workshop. I'll conclude by just taking you through your homework exercise. So we started off on this exercise as part of our workshop today. We started off by identifying the asset system, started developing the hierarchy of your asset system that you are responsible for managing. The homework exercise is really to expand on the work that you've already started by including more asset categories, developing that hierarchy from the initial list that you've created, sketch out that full hierarchy, add and remove branches as necessary. But then we're going to take this a step further than what we have done today. Try and implement an identification system that so that each asset in the asset hierarchy has a unique ID, which is apparent and it is intuitive and it means something for your organization. It relates to your organization. Now, when we see the feedback from your responses, we don't expect you to have a right and a wrong answer. Every answer is going to be different, which is appropriate for your own organization. So develop an asset identification system and then start identifying the different data types at the different levels of your hierarchy. And make sure that, as I said before, when you're developing this hierarchy, don't go into the minute detail, know when to stop. Stop at the maintenance managed item level. So that's where you say, okay, the pump is my asset, the spare part is not, the filter is not my asset, it is a spare part of the asset. So I'm going to manage data about the asset, not about the spare parts, okay? So that's your homework exercise. And if it is not clear, just message one of us, send us an email or something, and we can clarify what the homework exercise is. So thanks a lot for listening. Before we close the session, I'm going to hand over to Vladimir to talk about what you can expect to hear tomorrow. So Vlado, I'll hand over to you to say a few words.
Thank you, Ajit. Congratulations for your excellent presentation, and thanks to the crew behind
Thank
the
you.
scene. And talking about hierarchy, and I was just thinking about financial accounting, which is using the same work breakdown structure. And one of the categories I like, it's with the ID number 400, which are the revenues. I like it very much. Not so much 500, which are the expenses. And in this category, 500, it's part of it, it's a depreciation of assets. And but tomorrow, we're gonna see how the depreciation is calculated by two methods. One is called the accounting method, which has four types of methods, five, sorry. And on the end, how we calculate the asset value of our asset used by asset managers. When we know the value of the asset, then we have to see what are the critical assets, what are the risky assets, and then prioritize them for maintenance and replacement or renewal of the assets. That's what we're going to see tomorrow, how it's been done. And on the end, we're going to see how to calculate and how to produce a capital investment plan and asset management plan, financial plan. We're going to use a lot of tools, Excel tools. I'm glad to see that everybody is familiar and using Excel. So on the end of the session, we're going to have all these methods, how to calculate depreciation, how to calculate asset value, how to prioritize, how to see that the risks all are produced in Excel, and also the financial plans. So those are the templates you can use. You can modify them, you can combine if you're familiar with Excel. So also the second topic, which we're going to discuss and present tomorrow, are the composite indicators used for measuring municipal development index, and also key performance index for asset management information system, especially for the financial planning towards the sustainable infrastructure. On the end, we're going to go a little bit same about the information technology, how to start, where to start using Excel, which Ajit mentioned before, and stepping toward the best available technology solutions for IT, information technology systems. And also there are many available for water supply, which we use in Europe, in southeastern part of Europe, but also in southern part of Africa, which is called Adams. That's the company who are producing the software, not only for the water supply, but also particularly for municipal asset management infrastructures. And on the end, we're going to see it's not about the software we are using and data. Data and information should be shared in between the different levels of the governments, let's say from the local level up to the government level, national level, different ministries and agencies. Thank you very much. I will hand it over to Daniel for the final word. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Vladimir. Really looking forward to tomorrow's session and all the concrete tools you will share with us. I also want to thank Ajit for an excellent presentation and really generating a lot of excitement, I think, about the topic. A few words on the assignment and the certification again, because we're getting continued inquiries about it. So the homework that was just shared with you, you don't have to rush it. It doesn't have to be done tomorrow. This is all part of the assignment process that will lead to a certification in the end. The AMAP we would like to have by the end of March, and the other homework we would like to have by the end of April. But we will be very, very flexible, and quality matters more than timing. So we'll be very, very flexible, and we'll be working with you. Also, please check our website. You see the links here. We'll send you those links in an email as well. That will provide you with the AMAP template, the AMAP writing guide, and you'll also see the dates for the remaining workshops. So we will work with you. There's no rush, but as a general deadline, end of March for the AMAPs and end of April for the other homework. So we'll thank you again for everyone. Thank you to Claire for doing an excellent job as well, working with Ajit. Thanks to Francis and the whole team behind us. Thank you for sharing this slide also on the handbook, Wanda. Now we'll see it here on the screen. That handbook is soon to be available in French, Swahili, and many other languages. Right now, you can download it in English on our website. So thank you again to everyone, and see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of the day.